Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blackline Brief podcast, where we cut through the noise and brief you about what's really happening in technology, AI, and the intersection with business, specifically small and mid-sized businesses. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jody Jankovsky. I'm the founder and CEO of Blackline, and I've been in the tech field for about 45 years and with Blackline for about 32. And so I've seen the evolution of technology over decades. And so I bring that experience to bear. I'm here today with Israel Squires, our Chief AI Officer at Blackline, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey, Jody, good to be here. Always good to be here talking about AI. Israel Squires, I'm our Chief AI Officer. I've been in AI for 13 years now, starting in predictive analytics and got deep into machine learning. And then generative AI came. So I had to start over from scratch. But yeah, I've been in this game for quite some time and navigating and ultimately identifying the best ways for businesses to effectively adopt artificial intelligence.
All right, excellent. I'm looking forward to this conversation, as always, every time we get together and talk about geeky stuff like this. So let's talk about our first segment, which is on we got to go back to the first. We're not doing Claude. We're doing the first segment here. There we go.
There we go.
All right, we're going to talk about our first segment, which is AI and the workforce shifts. That's pretty much all. The biggest, let's call it, impact of AI seems to be hitting businesses and basically with the workforces, reduction in force, looking at AI as replacement of people. So why don't we start there? What is the perspective for the small, mid-sized business leader when it comes to implementing AI inside their company? What's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first off, there's this massive clash in narrative in that when we meet with SMB leaders and talk to their workforce, we're very, very pointed in that, look, you're not going to lose your job. These tools aren't designed to replace you. They're designed to augment you. But then they see a headline and it's like Amazon lays off X amount of people. Microsoft lays off X amount of people. And it's like, wait a second, when is that eventually going to trickle down to us? Like, it's happening. So I think it's really important to differentiate these giant companies in terms of why they're actually laying off people, because it's not just AI. To simplify it, I mean, we've been talking for a long, long time. Lots of studies that show productivity of an 8-hour workday. Most people, especially at giant companies, they're actually working for like 2.5 to 4.5 hours. And when COVID hit, and then people had to transition to remote work and now transitioning back to hybrid or trying to get back in the office, that whole thing was just disrupted. And there isn't a way to just really track your workers. So with AI, it created this entirely new environment for the leaders of these big businesses to track, they're tracking thousands of workers, and to ultimately say, like, the old days are gone. Like, we're not okay with someone getting paid $150,000 an hour and they really did 2.5 hours of work. That's not okay. And ultimately what they were doing was clicking a few buttons, making some connections and doing this. And it's like, wait a second, some of that stuff can be automated and done by AI. So that's certainly a piece of it. And I think for a big company like Amazon, the reason why the layoffs happen is more of because of that productivity shift that just had to be accepted. It sort of had to be accepted, industry standard. These are workers. We're going to get them in an 8-hour workday. They're going to be productive for about 3 hours. They're trying to shift that. In the small, medium-sized businesses, that data is different. You wouldn't have lasted at a small, medium-sized business if you're being productive for 2 hours of the 8. Okay, so their workers are much more productive already, which completely shifts how AI is going to change their jobs, because it's going to augment them. What we see more is frankly workers that just have too much on their plate. So as AI is being injected, it's solving a completely different problem than what these big giant companies.
And the big giant companies have got hundreds of thousands of workers. You start to lay off 10,000, it's like almost kind of a blip. I know that doesn't sound right, but it's a different economics that you have in larger organizations that are running off of billions of dollars as opposed to a small, mid-sized company. When we were on that panel last week and we were talking about the same topic, what I've seen is that AI is in the task automation business, not in the role replacement. So it's the job of the business leader, the small business owner, or whoever is the one in charge of understanding and managing of a business, what tasks are being performed by their knowledge workers, and then just shuffling the deck with AI. AI is going to solve and has always solved tasks that humans don't do well that a machine can do better, just like we have all throughout human history. Like you've got power saws now, when for the last for the last 2,000-3,000 years, people used hand saws to build things. Well, yeah, you can now have this new tool. It makes that same carpenter uh, 10 times more effective and more accurate and can produce more work. It's the same concept. You still need the brain of the individual who can be apply their judgment and their knowledge and their skills in order to do the job. So, um, the I guess from my perspective, the long and the short of it is the small mid-sized business is going to be much more effective and productive with the workforce that they have by just automating tasks which are not suited for a human to be doing. And that just frees up space, especially small businesses, which are already overburdened, to do higher functioning work, to grow, provide better customer service, provide a value propositions that they can't do today because they're on keyboard typing something they probably shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, certainly. I love that analogy of the saw, because the name of the game for SMBs is, how can you make your business like the place to work at? How can you execute on the same tasks with the same amount of workers way more efficiently, giving you that uptick in your margins, maybe giving you that 2% year over year uptick in your margin. That's the name of the game. It's not about, we're going to choose this tool because we're going to replace 8 of the 10 people in our HR department, because we know that if we connect these GPTs and we do this and we create this workflow, it can automate this whole onboarding process. And while some of that is true, the reality for the business is that, like, again, for SMBs, you need your humans. SMBs aren't going to function just on AI. You got a 100 employee company, 50 employee company. You need those folks, but you need to keep them. So the name of the game for SMBs is to reduce churn, reduce turnover. How are you going to do that? You're going to do that by making your business like the place to work at. You're going to do that by having your workers excited that they get to be optimized by AI tools and they get to use stuff and they're happy at work. They're not going in and they're not leaving, at the end of the day, just exhausted because they did one mundane task for the last 6.5 hours and their brain is numb and they hate their job. They feel worthless. And they're hopping on Indeed at the end of the night.
Yeah,
that's SMBs.
Think about the cognitive workload of a lot of knowledge workers. That let's use an example. Let's say that your role in the business is to collect information or data or do research because you're producing some kind of a work paper that helps whatever competitive advantage in your business or whatever happens to be. That task pre-AI was a mundane, mind-numbing web searching task. When the value that individual added to the process was their own judgment of what they were finding. The part that was mind-numbingly challenging and difficult was web searching and filtering through the results and finding what they really actually were looking for. That was not a good use of that person's time. The best use of that person's time was to take the information that was being gleaned from all these different sources and apply their valuable judgment and their knowledge and experience and their skill to that, and do that in a fraction of the time. That makes a better worker. That makes a better experience of the knowledge worker. We had multiple accounting companies that were going through the paperless initiatives years ago, right? And what that did was it freed up accounting departments to get away from paper that was part of the, let's just call it the financial workflow, had to be filed, had to be properly filed, then had to be retrieved if necessary to balance or to reconcile. Imagine that being your job, as opposed to helping analyze those numbers and make sure that AR was being taken care of. You're on this whole filing thing, right? And so, and as more paper in a growing business, more paper, it means you had to add more people in order to help manage paper. It was a ridiculous process, but you added automation to it, and the same departments didn't have to grow in headcount increase in size, but yet reduce the workload. And that was automation. So even though it wasn't AI, it was still, that was just an effect of automation inside the business. And AI is offering the exact same solution. It's just called something different. But it's still just automation.
That's right.
I mean, people call it artificial intelligence. I just call it artificial automation.
Yeah.
That would be a better approach. It is intelligent. It has some level of intelligence. People believe intelligence means it's got judgment, which it doesn't. It is far from that. It's garbage in, garbage out, just like your typical systems are today. Just having this conversation yesterday with my sister, of all people, who's a teacher, and she's like, I cannot believe how stupid some of the students and staff are with AI, is because they're producing garbage out because of how that they're asking it on the way in. Mm-hmm. And it's going to manipulate almost, or provide the results which it thinks you want, regardless of whether or not that actually passes any kind of muster of whatever the topic happens to be. And she's like, you still have to be an intelligent operator of your AI so that you're getting information, and then you glean from it and judge whether or not that information is actually accurate, and it accomplishes the objective that you intended. It still requires human operation. You wouldn't just put these machines that are building, maybe that's a bad analogy, because there are plenty of robots which are doing that, but you still have to have somebody who's designing and making sure that whatever's being built meets the market demand.
Yeah.
And then you can throw some automation in there to make it more efficient.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No doubt. If there was one thing, like if I had a magic zapper that could inject every human being on earth, like this nugget of knowledge, think of like Men in Black style. I'm going to flash them with this little thing, and they're going to wake up. They're going to know how neural nets work. Like if I could just teach everyone how a neural net works, they would have so much peace of mind, because they would know the limitations of generative AI specifically. And they would know that these are augmentation tools, and they would see headlines about autonomy and AGI and all these types of things. And they would be like, well, yeah, that's not going to happen within generative AI. Like generative AI does not have judgment. It does not have any type of cognitive architecture. It doesn't have any of that. These are built on neural nets that are stupid. Like this is weak in the AI researcher world. We call generative AI stupid AI. Like it's not really AI. It's designed to give an output based upon solid inputs, not garbage with these, tools, these ChatGPTs, Claude. The inputs are fantastic. They did a wonderful job of structuring it. But at the end of the day, it's designed to give an output no matter what, even if the output is stupid, because it doesn't know if it's stupid. So like if everyone just understood how a neural net worked, I think the fear of being displaced, or fear of, frankly, any, Terminator stuff, I think they would be at peace with what's happening.
I'm in the same camp. The whole technology optimism related to AI and related to any type of automation tool. People over the year. I've been in this business for a long time. It is the same mindset of fear that people and humans have to fill in a gap of knowledge, and the brain usually goes to the worst case scenario. If you don't understand something, we as humans, that's why we stereotype. That's why we judge a book by its cover. That's why we look at somebody in the way that they appear, and then you make judgments, because humans have got to have continuity in thought of, what is this person? What is this situation? Is it a threat, or is it something to embrace? You have to fill in the gap somehow. And that's what we're doing with AI. And it's a shame, because when you see all the negativity out there, I feel like it's without fully understanding the mindset around the tech. And I think that's what we're trying to do, even with these kind of conversations, is let's up-level a little bit. Let's take away some of the, strip away some of the fear, and also strip away and expose what really is the noise. Like let's filter out some of that noise. And my hope is that through this conversation like this, we have business leaders on the other side, like you, that are hearing this, engage with us. Let's get those topics of conversation out with professionals who've been doing this for a very long time, but do it in a way that is aligned with what the small, mid-sized business leaders' context is. That's different than the Microsofts and the Amazons and the Facebooks and all the big tech players out there. They're the way that, and this has been the case forever. you've seen this, like the investment and the sophistication level of big companies is totally different than small mid-sized organizations which are using those tools.
Yeah.
And if we just listen to what big tech was telling us in terms of how we deploy tool sets, we're going to be spending a lot of time, a lot of money, and we're not going to be getting the outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's move on to the second segment. We're going to talk about vibe coding. We're going to talk about the tools which are coming out like OpenClaw. There's also one called Claude Cowork, which these are kind of going from generative AI. Now we're moving into agentic AI and automation, right? Which is still the promise of AI. Okay. So let's talk about, and let's get your perspective, Izzy, on, let's say, OpenClaw to begin with. Code generation. That's really what it is at the core. There's a lot of nuance to that product, what it can do, but what it comes down to in these space, it's vibe coding. So let's talk about vibe coding and these let's call them these code generation tools. What's your perspective on that?
I'm going to take the perspective of what I think an SMB CEO wants to hear, or maybe needs to hear. OpenClaw, these vibe coding tools, here's what they've enabled for the SMB marketplace. They've enabled affordable customization, affordable custom software, affordable custom workflows. That frankly, they looked at in the past. You've been in this business in the IT world for over 30 years. And the options that they have are off the shelf tools, and figure out, okay, here's the price point on that tool. How can we inject it? Oh, Jody, but man, with our workflow, we need to do this, and this. Well, we can build that for you. That's going to take a couple of engineers. Here's the project scope. Here's the cost. Whew. Okay. Custom engineering and custom software probably isn't the path for us in the SMB. Now, fast forward 30 years, and here we are today, where now they're making the same asks, and we're saying, all right, well, we can low code, no code this aspect of it. We can solve this aspect with a custom GPT or one of these generative AI tools, and then we can integrate a workflow tool. And guess what? That's in a reasonable price range, more like 5 to 10 grand. We can solve that for you, as opposed to like 50, 60, $100,000 custom software projects. And that is enabled by a Claude code most engineers that I interact with are using, Claude code, Claude Claw here, and vibe coding in a way that they're like one person development shops. The top engineers that I talk to, they're just like, I can do projects today that 3 years ago would have been 7 engineers. I'm doing it on my own now. And, for us, there's the whole aspect of, the worker component and making sure that we're just not utilizing these tools and burning out engineers. But the output, and again, the availability for SMBs, is that like, this is an option now. And every time I educate a CEO on that and kind of break that down for them, you can just see, within days, I'll get a follow-up email. And they're just like, what about this use case? What about this use case? What about this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And we start to break things down. Yeah, that can be done in some low code, no code, really, really cheap. Let's hop on a call. I could probably do that one for you like in 2 hours, and I'll do QA for a couple days. That one might take a couple weeks, right? Like,
but there's still an aspect here that I think is important to dig into, is who is doing the vibe coding. Okay.
Yeah.
And who is managing the vibe coder, and then what is the sophistication of the vibe coder to align with best practices that are related to it. So take that exact same concept, right, that you just described, as you got CEOs or you got people in a position to lead these types of efforts. What are the risks? What that you see? And then I'll dive into how I see it, because I've got a software development background. But what do you see as the risks of the business leader that sees these tools to apply to a specific business case, problem, challenge, whatever they have inside the organization, and they now, without much kind of, like, I want to call it thought into it, just just rush into it, just like rushing into any other tool that we've seen over the years. What what is to be what is to be, maybe putting the brakes on that?
Yeah. Well, here are the two risks. First risk and the biggest risk, whether it's a Claude tool, ChatGPT, or anything else, is that connecting them to your environment, your data environment, sounds awesome, sounds sexy, sounds like this is what I've been dreaming of for the last 40 years in leading my business. Is now I can connect this AI tool and it's going to fix all my ERP problems that I've been struggling with. I'm just going to connect it to my SharePoint and it's going to give me the proposal output that we've wanted. Problem is there's not a single tool that's going to solve a messy data environment. There's not a single tool that's going to solve a messy ERP or even a good ERP for now. So there's an over-reliance and an over-reliance on the tool, underestimation of the blocking and tackling work that needs to be done in order for the tools to work properly. So that's the biggest risk. And again, whether that's Claude or any other tool, over reliance upon the capabilities of the tools for now, again, because they see headlines and what AI can be as opposed to what generative AI is today. And then an under reliance upon or an underestimation of the blocking and tackling work that needs to be done.
The disciplines that
are
necessary. Necessary in any type of technological endeavor.
Yeah.
So you touched on something really important. This would be the message that I would have for the CEOs or the business leaders that are making decisions about this, is that there's still in any technological solution requires an architect, a designer, somebody who understands the physics of the technologies themselves before they just start vibe coding and allowing somebody in an organization maybe that isn't truly qualified to do that work. So when you first were talking about these are great tools in the hands of a qualified
and that's
engineer.
My second risk.
And just to talk about the very first risk is, if I was to use an analogy, going back to the saw, kind of concept. If you have a master carpenter, AI is like having this incredibly talented apprentice that you can say, I want you to cut 35 boards in this way with these angles at this length. And now I'm going to show you how to build a wall. And then I'm going to fasten all those together in this way with these tools, with this hardware. And you're going to get this incredible efficiency gain up. What the master carpenter has over the AI, and in the case of vibe coding, has over the results of the code, is that they have structural knowledge of the why and the what, and the years of experience about how you build buildings. Vibe coding is a lot of, I can quickly build a wall. But if we don't have an architect to be sure that all those walls, when they go up, is actually creating a structure that can stand the test of time, that can be maintained, that can be extended, that's where vibe coding fails in the wrong hands.
Yep.
And that's right. So what's your second?
So the second risk is, again, SMBs is being sold on the idea that some young whippersnapper can come into your business and solve these issues because they know AI really well. They're 24 years old. They might know the tool, probably know the tools really, really well. They probably kick some ass when it comes to developing low code, no code solutions and doing cool stuff. But if they don't have any idea about your industry, your workflows, how your business, they don't have any expertise, they're just going to come in and they're just going to waste time and money and effort. Similar to on the engineering side of things, what these vibe coding tools have done, they've made good and great engineers superstars and superheroes. But it doesn't mean that a young whippersnapper, 22-year-old, because they can vibe code, is going to be able to go into a software development environment and just be that one person development shop because they're not the master carpenter.
Not in the small mid-sized business. I've seen this over and over again, that to a business leader, the master carpenter and the apprentice with only a couple of years of experience, they looked the same because this apprentice can put up a wall, right? And it's like, well, so can the master carpenter. And there's a manufacturer that we work with that had the equivalent of a vibe coder for years that was not schooled computer scientist building systems that would be the equivalent of looking at a building that had 6 different foundations, 4 different heights and levels and sizes and different materials in one building as opposed to another one piecemeal together, that if you pulled out one wall, the entire thing would collapse. If you wanted to make modifications, you had to take in consideration a hodgepodge network of solutions that were independently built without the knowledge of physics, of architecture, of physics, of how do you design a system like you would design a building to accomplish the goal today, but then also be extendable and accessible and maintainable and adapt to the business need in the future. And so that would be my warning to this small mid-sized company. Now you talk with, I listened to a podcast called the All In Podcast, and there's Jason Calcanis on there. Okay. He was an early adopter of this, and he talks about his team and what they're able to do. And they have one agent talking to another agent doing these kind of things. That's because Jason and his team he's hired experienced, highly competent, highly compensated engineers who understand that topologies and are able to be that super engineer and create this ecosystem using the disciplines and the physics of how you actually build software in those environments. So they're super users. That doesn't apply to the small mid-sized business that understands insurance, that understands distribution, that understands financial services, that understands accounting or healthcare. Those business leaders are less equipped to guide and manage and pick and understand those efforts.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a combination of less equipped. And, when you look at call it the game plan, again, 100 employee company, like they only have so much room for, call it investment, ingenuity, trying to do things outside of the box, experimenting. They don't have the same risk profile as a giant company. They don't have X amount of dollars that they can just say, okay, if we lose here, we lose, but we got some good PR out of it, so it's okay. There's no SMB in the world that could have that type of mindset. So for them, they're like, we need tangible ROI. If we're going to spend $20,000 on anything, like we need to get $30,000 back. And AI can do that when deployed properly. But there's not going to be, again, some young whippersnapper that's going to be able to come in and they could just, we're going to hire somebody. It's 75 grand. Kid just graduated from college. But man, in the interview, dude knows all these AI tools. So we're going to hire him and just say, figure out our AI strategy. It's not going to work. It's not going to work because he doesn't have the industry expertise. He doesn't have the expertise to even be able to communicate with the leaders the way that he needs to communicate about things like change management and training and all the stuff that you need to wrap these new deployments with. So what you're going to end up doing is paying this person. They're going to do a bunch of pilots and the pilots are never going to get out of pilot because you don't know how to strategically deploy these tools and these new workflows in a way that can stick. And that's
you touched on something important. I think would be a good kind of segue in this conversation. And it kind of ties back to the workforce conversation, but you just brought it up again, which is change management. Change. If we just abstract out the fact, what is change in any organization? That's why there's change management experts out there, because AI, and let's just call it any technological advancement. What I've seen throughout all of my career is that as soon as you change a human's job that they've been trained on, they've got workflow, they've got habit, they've got a process, just like we need to know as humans what to expect in our world. When you start monkeying with people's workflows, their business. So let's talk about that specifically, because you just kind of tied into it as a key challenge to the small, mid-sized business is going to be, how do you affect and manage change of AI through business?
Yeah. I mean, that's leadership. You have to have committed leaders. And if you don't have committed leaders to changing, meaning changing themselves, like it has to start with them.
It's got to start with them.
It's got to start with them. We push leaders to test tools. Like immediately, how many tools are you using? Have you used ChatGPT? Have you used, well, I've heard about this. Well, let's get you using them. Let's get you familiar. Let's get you just understand kind of what types of things can happen. Um, because it's not going to work if you're going to stand, you and your executive team, leadership team are going to look at everyone and say, all right, we've created this internal AI task force. We've identified champions. Those are good steps. All right, you guys go figure this out, report to us every couple of weeks, and then we're going to report to the board. What's going to ultimately happen is completely unreasonable expectations because you haven't, as leaders, taken the dive yourself. You haven't taken the education training. You haven't understood. Again, you don't need necessarily go as far as understanding what a neural net is, but you should really understand the limitations of these tools, the capabilities of low code, no code tools, and the further capabilities, and ultimately how you get to the real AI, which is machine learning. Like, how can your company get there? All these leaders have been hearing, gosh, for 20 years now, that data is the new oil, but it just became a tagline. No one ever understood what the heck that even meant. Well, now, once we educate these folks on here's phase one of implementing AI, here's phase two, here's phase three, and guess what? Phase four, we've been congruently creating data environments specifically to be tied to AI tools, and we've now monetized your data. It's now oil. It never has been historically because you had it unlabeled, unsegmented, and it was just garbage. Once leaders have that map in their mind and we give them clarity around what is the strategy of AI, then they have the capacity to strategize. So it has to start with leadership, educating themselves, and then transcending that education to the rest of their leaders, the rest of the workforce. And then you move into phase two, which is identifying the use cases, dabbling with some tools, figuring out what the best strategy is for your company because it's custom. And custom is now an option.
So what you just described is what I wrote about in my book, Technology Intelligence, which is the innovation mindset. And the innovation mindset is one where you have to understand the forces at work with these technologies. You don't have to know the technologies themselves. I know that almost sounds like a contradiction. Like you have to understand, but you don't. You have to understand the physics of these technologies. What they're capable of is different than knowing how they do it. Knowing the difference between a sports car and a straight truck, they're both transportation. They both got wheels. They both got engines. They both got transmissions. They both got steering wheels. They both got, they all have, but you know the difference between if I'm going to be running a logistics company and delivering produce to customers, right? A sports car is the wrong approach.
Could be fun though.
It might be fun, but you probably does not accomplish the business objectives that you've got at a different price point. All right. That's correct. That is the level that I recommend. Business leaders just need to know, what technologies are they working with? Are they working with a straight truck or an over the road semi? Or are they dealing with a Lamborghini, right? Or a Corvette? Or are they working with just a 4-door sedan? There is the ability to recognize those differences, and it's up to the business leader to know what those differences are inside the realm of tech. Where in the stack is it? What are the effects of these technologies on the different stacks? So what I mean by stack is there's technologies which build upon each other. AI is at the tippy top. It relies upon all these other technologies to be successful. You mentioned data, right? You've also got infrastructure. You also got security on the security layer in your infrastructure. You've got line of business applications that have all different versions of data and the truth that AI needs for it to be effective.
Yeah.
As a business leader, you have to understand the stack.
Yeah.
You don't need to know how it operates. You need to know, if I don't have good security rules and good segmentation of where data is and accessible by who, how do I put a productivity tool on top of that to be sure that the accounting department and the HR department and operations aren't sharing information that they shouldn't be seeing of each other? You need to have that translates right into an AI conversation. You don't need to know how the security topologies work and role-based and Active Directory, and you don't need to know how all that works. You just need to know that is a thing to be considering in the decision process.
That's right. Yeah. And you need to know how to like decipher between the headlines, because you'll see headlines about Claude, and Claude is painting that picture. We can create connected workflows that are going to connect all your departments, and you're going to have agents that can be integrated in every step of the process, variations of agents. And then they're going to mostly inaccurately, you're going to see the word autonomous being thrown around, and you're going to see this like pie in the sky vision, and it's awesome. But to get there, specifically for SMBs, like, it is a process, and you have to commit to that process. And it's not, that pie in the sky for most SMBs isn't achievable in the next 5 years. It's really not. I think you can build towards it. And if you're there and you're ready to strike in 5 years and you're ready to play in the machine learning game because you figured out how to monetize your data and you've done all of that work, that's when you separate yourself from your competitors.
So let's take that as an example. So let's get practical.
Yeah.
Claude Claude product allows you, and I know that we also have other tools that will allow you to hook up to, let's just call it corporate resources.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got MS 365, you got some kind of a CRM, you got your schedule, you got your calendar, right? Access to your email, file shares, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
So these tools will hook up to those, let's just call them sources of corporate information, email flow, these files that have been generated and are standing out there. So now you got to, when you start hooking that up, like you said, the tools are there to be able to hook that up. What comes to mind is like a pause about that, because it looks easy to do, but what is the real risk behind that? Or it looks easy to do and the promise is real, right?
Yep.
But the reality is that your organization may not be ready to do that. What are some of the you're not be readies to help share with everybody?
Yeah. First, let me give you the imagery that came to mind where you're bringing up this topic and use case is, if you've seen any movie where they're trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Fix a bomb. They're trying to
Disarm.
Disarm. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any movie where they're trying to disarm a bomb, and you've got the guy and whatever, he works for the FBI and he's got sweat dripping down his face and he's looking at wires and he's going, green wire, blue wire. Oh, green wire, blue wire, green. Which one do I do? Right. And in the movies, he always chooses the right wire to connect. I guess there's probably been a few where he chose the wrong one and then things exploded. When companies come to me and they're like, hey, we just purchased this license, we want to connect it to our data environment, whatever data environment that may be. And then I asked them the question, well, what's the current status of your data environment? Like, what are the current status of this, and this? Never once. I take that back. We have one client where the answer came back, it was a PE firm, and they are just pristine in their data practices. Other than that, it's, oh, well, we have this, and okay, all right. If they answer with a high level of confidence about their data segmentation.
Like they didn't have good segmentation by roles or by security. It was just a little
by
bit,
department, by document function, by, right? Like,
okay.
We have all of our I was an M&A attorney, so we're going to have all of our stock purchase agreements in one file, and we've gone through it, we've filtered it, we've labeled them when we file them with a filing naming system. That way that naming system can be correlated into the AI tool. Like, I never hear that ever, which means that if we're going to connect anything, we're playing that bomb game, and we're hoping that we don't choose the wrong wire, because if we choose the wrong wire, a bomb will explode. And what I mean by that is, there's levels of this. So is your data labeling segmented? Typically, no. Do you have that naming system that we can tie into the AI tool? Typically, no. All right. If the answer is yes, or we feel good that we can accomplish that in a couple of weeks, okay, let's go through a permissions audit on those data environments. Who on your team has permissions to what? Typically, the answer is, well, we've done a really good job. We use Outlook as an example. These folks don't have access to our finance files. These folks, they have permissions and they have this. Okay, well, when's the last time that you dove into that? Ooh, been a while. Okay, well, let's dive into that right there before we even get into any other areas.
And if you don't dive into that, now you have a couple different possibilities. One is that your security topology is not kept up with the growth of your company. And now, what wire did I love that analogy. What is the green wire or is it the red wire? Or you have the other aspect. I just heard this story recently, is that an organization hooked up their AI to their let's call it their file share, SharePoint or whatever it happens to be, the multiple file shares. And what they had was documents that were in there that were basically at competing version levels. Like one person saved version 1, let's just use that simply. Another person saved version 3 and somebody else saved version 5, but the AI was hooked up to all of it. Now the AI is garbage in, garbage out. This is the physics of the way technologies have worked since they've been technology don't change. Garbage in, garbage out. You give it 3 different sources, that AI is going to hallucinate. It's going to be like, which one do I pick? It's some version of that. I present one. There's one company that did an HR similar. They hooked up their HR stuff to it. They hooked up their email. And when asked the question about some very important policy about a way that they handle conflict or whatever, gave the wrong answer because it picked up an email where somebody had recommended a change of their policy based upon a real life example, but they never accepted it. But that got published to people as that was their policy. That is not an uncommon nor low case probability in this world of AI. You can't just the tool can do it. Yes, they will allow you to hook up to your email, to your schedule, it'll let you do that. But if you feed it a bunch of unorganized, unstructured, non-secured, now somebody you think it's a general HR bot that you can ask questions about your policies in your handbook. But then you say, hey, but what does the CEO actually make? And it picked up some spreadsheet that was done by the HR person he didn't realize or she didn't realize was in that folder. Now all of a sudden, that is a reality. That is and so it's just be sure which wires you're clipping.
Yeah.
Because you could have a bomb that would go off in your organization that you can't get back.
Yeah.
You can't, it's that missile that got launched is like, well, can't recall this. It's going on its way. It's going to just blow up a whole bunch of people, right? It's a similar thing. So we've got to land this ship. We're about out of time. What is an ending thought on, let's just say small, mid-sized business, one thing that they can leave with today, with all the things that we've just been covering, an actionable item that they can take with them today?
Yeah. I've got to say, Jody, I've spent the last 5 years of my life dedicated to AI, traveling around the country, doing keynotes and seminars and workshops. And I've been very adamant at every single one of them saying, look, you're not behind an AI. I know you're seeing in the headlines, like all these bigger companies that are in the industry, but way bigger. They're doing this and they're doing that. You're not behind. Be easy. It's okay. Today, if you're not starting, you are behind. You have to start. You have to start today. Again, it's a 5-year path to ultimately get to where you need to be, to knock out all of your competitors in 5 years if you're going to do it the right way. If you don't do it, you're going to be one of the companies that gets knocked out. So, if I had a call to action today, it's start. You've got to start.
I love that approach, and I would say it's not 5 years, it's 3 years.
Yeah,
but start. So I would make the exact same recommendation, which is look at this from an innovation mindset perspective. Again, this is what I wrote about. The innovation mindset is one where you're willing for the goal of exploration of what can be possible. You invest in the unknown ROI. You don't know what it is yet exactly. You know you need it. You know that it's a very, very powerful tool. You don't know exactly how it's going to affect your organization, but you start. You get educated. You understand some use cases. You start the process of at least gaining some internal knowledge so you can explore and then see what happens. Because I know what'll happen. Business leaders are intelligent, they're capable, they're creative, they're forward thinking, they're strategic. Once they see like, oh, that can solve this problem, they're going to connect the dots and then they're going to put real effort into it. So that would be my recommendation.
I love it.
So thanks for tuning into this episode of the Blackline Brief. And I hope you found some value in what Izzy and I were talking about. And if you like this, we really do want to engage and not just be a talking head kind of a thing. So like this, subscribe this, communicate, comment, send us. We're not going to sell you anything. I promise. We're looking to do this to create in the small, mid-sized space, a conversation space that's going to add value so that you can be empowered and you can drive the change that you need in your business in the intelligent age. Thanks for joining.